type of sand. 255 means nothing, and everything else means a type of sand. So if you've got 500 sand cells in your grid, you've got 500 sand cells. And the rules of the sand engine are that it never erases. If something moves and it tries to move into a cell that's occupied, then it has to swap places with it. So like if a stone is falling down and it's wanting to move into a cell with water, it doesn't destroy the water. It moves into it, and then the water moves into where it was. It literally just swaps the positions. That's how the sand simulation works. The sand particle driver, the thing, moves those things around smoothly. They can overlap. They don't collide. They don't bounce off of each other. This is an important feature of it because a lot of time you make a whole bunch of them in a tight area, and then you want them to explode outwards. You don't want to be limited by how many you can make by the surface area of the area you're located in. So when something explodes, you might want to make a whole bunch in the same spot, and then they all fly outwards from there. Well, that means they can overlap. And that means that when one of them hits a wall and deposit and turns back into sand, it's going to create it at a position. If another one happens to be over that same cell when it hits the wall, it's also going to try to create its sand in that same location. So if two of these particles are in the same or happen to be over the same cell when it's time for them to disappear and deposit their water, they're not going to deposit two waters. They're going to ultimately deposit only one. They're going to deposit one and then another one right on top of it, which is just one water. So you can lose. You are not guaranteed to get back from a collection of sand particles the exact number of sand particles that you created. You can't be because of the way they work. They are allowed to overlap. So how do you solve this problem? You could say, well, make it so that they can't overlap. Make it so they bounce off each other. This is a sudden order of magnitude increase in complexity on that simulation. These things were meant almost just for visual effect, throwaway effects. It is 10 times less computationally intensive to not worry about collisions. There is no data structure to keep track of collisions and where they are. There's no collision resolutions. There's none of that. It is the simplest of math and the simplest of data structures, and that's why you can just make gazillions of these things and frame rate doesn't care. I said, so, all right, well, I could do that. I can spend the next 4 hours adding this, and then I'm still going to have a problem because I'm not going to be able to always create the particles because I have to have space to make them in. So when a splash occurs, I have to have a spot to put them if the rule now becomes they can't overlap. I'm like, and I'm like, this is too much trouble for a splash, right? I can't. I said, but I want the splash. But it's too much trouble. I said, all right, well, maybe this is just how it works. Splashes cause evaporation. We just define the problem away with words. Just say that's it. That's how it works. But there's something deeply unsatisfying about that, right? I mean, here's the problem, and yeah, it's really not a problem. That's a feature. So, I went to lunch over it, and then it occurred to me, boy, this is the dumbest thing ever. I know this is a long walk to get to this, to the most obvious answer. And the most obvious answer is the system was built as a visual. I want a visual. So why am I consuming the water in the first place? I don't need to take away the water and then give it back. Just don't take away the water and never give it back. The splash is a special effect only. The particle gets created, but it's told to not carry anything. I do not remove a water when something hits it, and I don't expect it to be given back. It's just a particle that comes, and when it hits or it times out, it just disappears. The splash happens, but it has nothing to do with sand accounting. It is nothing but a visual effect. The reason that works is it dodges the problem completely with a solution that was meant to do exactly that. Be there for something where you want effects.
Something transient.
They're transient. And that GIF I posted yesterday.
Did you post one?
animated GIF on that blog post with the acid. Yeah, if you hover over it, it'll animate uh, on Discord in that blog post.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, of course you did
Should
do that.
should should be anyway. Let's
Yeah,
see.
no, I see it. I see it. I've got it. Yeah.
If you watch carefully at the bottom as the acid rain is hitting the lava, you see these yellowish particles. That's actually splash. That's
Okay.
because I turned on by default the splashes boolean is on by default for liquids. You have to turn it off if you don't want it on liquids. So it's turned off on things like lava and molten metal, but acid and water and a few other liquids, it's on by default. So you can set it either way, on or off. But and it checks the velocity of the collision. So if the velocity is below a certain amount, it doesn't get made. So if you just drop some sand in some water from a small height, it doesn't splash. If you get high enough and it hits the water, then the water will create the splash particles. And the higher you get, the more those particles will kind of spray out. So if you make an entire from the very top of the map to the bottom of the map, drop some stone into water off 512 pixels away, you get a really big visual splash. This this solves this accounting problem without having to do anything. It makes it just a visual effect. You get the splash, but you don't get loss of water or all these accounting issues. It comes at one cost, which was a feature I didn't even think about until I had played with it, in that since the splash isn't actually carrying water, you can't splash the water up into other areas. When those particles actually carried water, you could, in
Would
theory,
water would manifest somewhere else? Yeah.
get it to go up into some other area.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's not the worst thing. I think
It's not. I didn't even consider that as a feature until I accidentally saw it.
mm.
Anyway, that's a really long story for a really simple uh, answer, but that was the better part of yesterday. That was the better part of the whole day, and it took me till lunch to figure out